Let's talk about one of the first things that trips people up when they're learning French: plurals. At first glance, it can feel like a total mess of silent letters and endings that don't make any sense. But what if it's all just a few simple, predictable patterns? Well, in this masterclass, we're going to crack the code on French plurals. For good.
And to guide us through this, we're tapping into the expertise of A French Rendez-Vous, one of Canada's absolute best second language schools. We're going to be using their unique pattern-based approach to make this all crystal clear.
You know, the real key to getting French plurals right isn't about memorizing endless, boring lists. It's about spotting a handful of core patterns. Once you see them, I promise you, everything just clicks into place. So let's start with the most important one.
All right, let's build this from the ground up. We're going to start with the bedrock of it all, the one single rule that, believe it or not, covers the huge majority of nouns in French.
Okay, so this is what we call the pluriel regular, and you're going to love how simple this is. For most nouns, you just tack an S onto the end. So un service becomes des services. Now, here's the most important part for when you're speaking. That final S is completely silent. The only change you actually hear is the little word in front, the article, going from un to des. Simple, right?
Now, I know what you're thinking. Okay, but what about all the exceptions? And here's the beautiful thing about French. Even the exceptions follow predictable patterns. We're not dealing with a bunch of random one-off rules. We're dealing with groups, and once you see them, you can't unsee them.
First up, we've got the easiest pattern of them all, the invariable nouns. Basically, if a singular noun already ends in an S, X, or Z, you do absolutely nothing. The word itself doesn't change one bit. So, un choix, one choice, becomes des choix, some choices. Again, the only thing you hear change is that article.
Okay, here is our next major piece of the puzzle. For most nouns that end in all, you're going to see that ending transform into aux when it becomes plural.
And this slide shows that pattern in action perfectly. The classic example everyone learns is un journal, a newspaper, which becomes des journaux. But like any good pattern, it has a few famous exceptions you just have to know. A really common one is un festival, which breaks the rule and just adds a simple S to become des festivals.
You'll see a pretty similar idea with words ending in ale. Now, the general rule here is to just add that silent S. But there's a small handful of really common, really important words that break away and take that aux ending instead. And this is a perfect example. For most words, like un détail, you just add the S to get des détails. But for memorable, important words like un vitrail, a stained glass window, it flips to des vitraux. And another huge one in this special group is un travail, which means work. It becomes des travaux. We're definitely coming back to that one.
This next pattern, it's wonderfully consistent. If a noun ends in O or ESU, you pretty much always just add an X to make it plural. So un bateau becomes des bateaux. And just like the S, that X is totally silent. There is one key exception to keep in mind, though. The word for tire, un pneu, which just takes a simple S and becomes des pneus.
Okay, for our final major pattern, I need you to lock one number into your brain. Just one. That number is 7. Because there are just 7 common exceptions you need to know for nouns ending in OU.
That's right. While almost all our nouns just take a normal S, these 7 special words take an X instead. They're sometimes called the 7 dwarfs of French grammar, and they are bijou, caillou, chou, genouille, hibou, joujou, and pou. That's jewel, pebble, cabbage, knee, owl, toy, and louse. Just learn these 7, and you've basically mastered the entire owl family.
All right, so we've got the theory down pat. Now let's put it into practice and see how these patterns show up in a professional or administrative setting, where getting the details right is absolutely crucial.
So the key concept here is agreement. Take a look at un rapport annuel, an annual report. The noun, rapport, just follows the basic rule and takes an S. But look at the adjective, annuel. It ends in al, so it has to follow its pattern and become annuels. See? Everything has to match.
And here's that exception we talked about earlier, but now we're seeing it in a real-world context. Un festival local. Festival is that special exception, so it just takes an S. But the adjective local, well, it follows the standard al rule and becomes locaux. This is just a perfect demonstration of how the whole system works together.
Ah, this is a big one. Un travail public, or public work.
Remember how we said travail was an irregular ale noun? Well, here it is. It becomes travaux. This exact term is incredibly common in government and business documents, so it's an essential one to know.
So what happens with compound nouns, words made of multiple parts? Let's take an appelled off, which is a call for tenders. In this very common business term, both of the main parts become plural. It turns into des appelled offs. It just goes to show you how these patterns apply even in more complex phrases.
So, as you can see, what might have seemed like a totally chaotic bunch of rules is actually a really logical system of patterns. Let's do a quick recap of the core principles before we talk about where you can go from here.
So, to wrap it all up, your default is just adding a silent S. If a noun already ends in S, X, or Z, you don't touch it. Then you've got your key patterns. Al usually becomes O, AU and EU take a silent X, and for OU you just have to remember those 7 special words. That's really the core of it right there.
This whole pattern-based method is incredibly effective, and honestly, it's the very same philosophy that a French Rendezvous uses in their entire learning ecosystem.
What they've done is create a complete system that's designed to help you succeed. This isn't just a few lessons. It's personalized courses with certified professors, an interactive platform you can use 24/7 for practice, and a whole suite of tools designed for however you learn best, whether that's with flashcards, visuals, or audio.
So, the real question is, are you ready to stop guessing and start feeling confident? Are you really ready to finally hit your language goals? If the answer is yes, I really encourage you to visit FrenchRendezvous.ca and see just how their structured approach can work for you. Because at the end of the day, mastering the details, like plurals, is the true path to fluency. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.
A French Rendezvous.